Going on? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
All right, all right. Give me 1 second. Let me just bring up a little document here.
hmm Did you get a chance to look through any of it, or?
Yeah, I kind of briefly went over everything, kind of integrating the Docusign and the forms into the smart contract. So I guess briefly explain to our viewers out there exactly what your company is and what you do.
Yeah. So Cyberswipe it's actually it's a telecom DApp, so it's decentralized application, and really what it's doing is it's bridging private interests, public interests, and service interests on the blockchain. All the different service providers, being mines or exchanges, all the enterprises, be it people who are producing assets and selling them globally, domestically. And then the public interests being regulatory bodies, governments, any regulators, legislators. And it's doing so it's linking them all together in a standardized way so that transactions can take place on the blockchain using Ethereum and smart contracts. So really, that's how it works. And I say telecom because at no point is Cyberswipe taking any of the information from these buyers and sellers. All that it's doing is providing a format or a channel of communication for these buyers and sellers to communicate.
Buyers and sellers, what?
So not buyers and sellers for trading purposes. It's not people exchanging money for cryptocurrencies. It's people exchanging actual assets. So whether it being agricultural goods, industrial goods, commodities, luxury items.
What about real estate?
For even real estate, yep. And when I say that it's standardized in the form of a format, really what it is we're pretty much putting this kind of box around Ethereum. Meaning that, Ethereum, the way it is designed now, the same way it is with Bitcoin, it's like a wire transfer. You put in a wallet address and you're sending money to someone else, a cryptocurrency to someone else. But there's no standardization of that, right? If I send, especially if I'm dealing with quantities of tens of millions of dollars, how do I know you're going to send the item to me?
Let's just take for an example a real estate transaction. How can your company facilitate that?
Right. So in terms of a real estate transaction, a seller would be able to create a contract, put out their terms, what it is, what they're selling, the amount in US dollars, and then they can have the ability to, depending on the buyer that they're inviting, because it's not a marketplace, it's for known buyers and sellers. They invite each other. They can put a deposit down, full amount down, whatever they want. Then they invite their buyer. The seller would then be able to upload documents like, the title of the land, any sort of geology, the geology specifications for the, the land quality. I know that they do that, dirt samples, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Essentially, all the back end work that would be required for the transaction to happen in terms of, knowing what the actual land is, what's on it, what's under it, etc. And then if the buyer wishes or if the seller wants to, because they're going to communicate outside of this platform, if the buyer is required to put up a collateralized asset and before they're supposed to upload the Ethereum to the smart contract, they can do that. If not, say, for example, they have to pay a deposit, they pay a deposit. And then once there's there's a payment date on the smart contracts. And then once that payment date comes, it locks in the Ethereum price. So there's no fluctuation to market volatility. It'll update the Ethereum price to reflect the US dollar locked in price. And those are kind of our stability controls to mitigate market volatility. And then the transaction's done. And then the point where service providers are locked in is, for example, when the buyer has to pay $10 million or more, where the hell did you get that $10 million? Well, you can't get it on Coinbase in a succinct amount of time. So we already have 3 partners, and it's growing, of exchanges and mines where the Cybrswype verified users can go on board to them separately, and then they're going to have like Cybrswype exchange liaisons essentially through these companies,
kind of like
in which they can.
You're talking about like a trust account.
Yeah, a custodial account. Yeah, and essentially what happens is these different entities. Of course, who get vetted by us to make sure that they have the custodial capabilities to do so, have all the proper licenses. They can accept banking instruments or cash and then receive the Ethereum, which will go directly into their Cybrswype wallets, which are public and private keys are owned by the users. At no point can Cybrswype actually begin to understand what the actual product it is it's being sold. All we have are registrations of the actual user IDs and then the amount.
Gotcha. So what do you think is going to happen to title companies?
Title companies would still be involved. We actually, it's actually a really good question because we were kind of doing pilots with the real estate industry here in Dallas. That's actually where the company is located. And we're working with title companies to understand better how, because all they have to do is verify there's been some sort of asset or value that's been transferred to the seller. And that's how they relinquish title because, they have to do that for fraudulent purposes to prevent against that. So all we have to do is provide, verification that a transaction is taking place. And that's actually done by the buyer and the seller. So of course, with the blockchain, you have the reference log so that each transaction has its own, essentially all the inputs marked and timestamped. Yeah. So whenever someone uploads a document, whenever it gets signed, whenever funds go into the contract, whenever funds get executed, all of that is done. All of it is ledgered and referenced on the blockchain for the specific transaction, which both the buyers and sellers get a copy of. So title companies would still be involved. In terms of how they can charge their fees, it's definitely going to be on a case-by-case basis because a lot of their work is done for them.
So basically, you're going to be eliminating, I guess, the paperwork and kind of like decentralizing the storage of the documents, pretty much.
So for that kind of transaction, yes, a lot of the paperwork is being done now. That's just kind of one part of the equation, because the second part of the equation is actually utilizing the cryptocurrencies themselves, because someone does have the capability of using just the blockchain functions of the Ethereum blockchain without using any cryptocurrency on the for the transactions. But obviously the reason why using the different cryptocurrencies have their values, and especially we've seen a lot of people that have been interested in using this platform have been on the continent of Africa, Southeast Asia, Eastern Bloc, Eastern Europe, because their banking institutions aren't able to be trusted, or they have bad election cycles, as kind of what's happening in Zimbabwe currently. So we're working with a lot of people all over the world to ask the right questions and understand why it is they'd be interested in using the cryptocurrency and blockchain, and then just trying to facilitate that through the the large network as a whole.
Gotcha. How far along are you in the project? Like, is it actually working right now?
Yeah, so the actual technology, it's working, it's live, it's in production state. We have, between buyers and sellers, we have just right under 500 institutions or 500 registrations that all come from large companies all over the world. And then in terms of where we're at in the kind of the big picture with the network, like I said, we have one proof of stake mine that's online that's working with us, and we have 2 exchanges out of the US that are working with us to provide this kind of back-end facilitation of obtaining large amounts of Ethereum. We have one more exchange that we're going to hold meetings with out of India in the next couple of days. And then as of right now, we're just going through, a big fundraising stage to kind of move the ball forward.
Okay. So I guess tell me a little bit about your background.
I was an SMU student here in Dallas. My background, I actually came from a family that provided cable and ISP services to the Navy. So I kind of have a telecom, computer science background. And I got involved with blockchain about 3 years ago, and then started this project about 14 months. Well, actually, this August will be 12 months. So I kind of came.
What got you started in this particular project? Like, how did you think of the idea?
So originally, and if you look at the website, you can see how there's a retail actual page, and really the project was designed entirely around a retail space, and it was to try to figure out how we can get people to kind of use cryptocurrencies in a daily capacity. So the project started out on that foot, and filed patents for speed, because the biggest obstacle with retail is all about transaction speed. It has nothing to do with the volatility, because the way that it was designed was with custodial licenses, transmittal, and money transmittal licenses, we would actually be able to take the exact amount of money out of someone's bank account, do a purchase order on an exchange, and have that money go directly to a merchant, all within a matter of seconds, which, we still have that intellectual property. But the problem was there's a lot of regulation, a lot of red tape. So I decided about 4 months ago to B2B. and we've seen a lot of positive feedback, a lot of very interested parties, and then I really tried to stay away from the getting in trouble with the regulations and staying away from all that red tape by being as impartial as possible, which is what led me to design the platform really like a telecom platform in which there's, in terms of a fintech application, there's no operation that would require money transmittal licenses or financial custodial licenses like that. So that's kind of what happened. I mean, I was at the retail point of the platform. We did a pilot at a local bar here in Dallas, and it went well. I mean, we had a merchant portal that could be used on tablets and used with a Square system, and it actually went really, really well. The problem was, in order to get it to the point where the B2B platform is now, it would have required a lot more capital, a lot more time, much more personnel, which at the time I didn't have. So I decided to pivot it to B2B, which is something that could grow a little more organically without such a large, institutional backing.
Yeah.
So that's why I changed to the B2B, which
it's good.
I would say was a smart pivot.
How big's the team?
So the team is comprised of myself. There's two others here.
What's your name?
Matthew.
Matthew. And you are the CEO, I take it?
Yeah, managing member, yeah. And
do you have a cap? Are you incorporated, or do you have a cap table?
We are incorporated here in Dallas, and it's under it's MSCP. The business is the actual business. It's a limited liability company.
Okay. So the team members are gonna go? Yeah,
so the team members, there's myself, and then we have two others, Barry Hayes and Michael Keegan, and they kind of act as advisors for me. They're people that I've known for about 4 or 5 years from being in Dallas. And then we have 3 independent contractors that are working as representatives for the company, and they're the ones that kind of network the business all around the world. They have independent contractor agreements, and they work on a commission basis for how much business they bring in.
Mm-hmm.
The other 2 that are here in Dallas are currently working, on sweat equity, essentially, and then that's pretty much it. And actually, all the development is also hired, and all the coding development is from a company called Efron Tech out in San Francisco.
And they're paid. They don't have equity.
No equity, all paid. Yeah. And then we have 2 legal offices. One's here in Dallas, obviously paid for legal work, and then the other one's an intellectual property attorney out of Coral Gables, Florida, in Miami, who I've known for family friends, known for a number of years, and they're the ones that do all of our IP work, and they're the ones that have filed the first patent and are getting ready to file our second patent.
Okay, let's talk about the tokenomics of the business.
Okay.
I guess you're gonna have. Are you gonna have a token?
No.
No. All right. So we'll skip that part. So there's no. Okay. So what are you seeking?
Originally it was for $500,000, but I've got my hands on 400,000 in the last week. So now we're looking to raise 3 million for 20% of the business.
So you got 400,000 last week, and that 400,000 came from one investor?
It was actually 200,000 I was able to get myself, and then it was 200,000 that came from another investor. Yeah.
So you put in 200 of your own money?
Yeah.
Okay. So what was that? What equity did he receive for that 200,000?
She received 5%.
5%. So basically, so there's no token, which is good.
Agreed.
There's really no use for it, really.
Correct.
You could come out with one, gives a bunch of tokens, but at the end of the day, it probably won't be worth nothing.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on that? Since you're agreeing with me.
To tell you the truth, I've spoken to a lot of investment bankers who all disagree with me. And just over the course of 2017 and watching the ICO boom, I mean, I saw some value there, but the problem was, and actually, you don't even have to take my word for it. You can research it in Wall Street Journal or Barron's, and out of the 3,500 or 4,000 crypto-centric companies that are operating within the confines of the United States, them actually do something worthwhile. The other 99%, they either are starting ICOs or are doing things like, creating blockchain schedules for bus schedules in cities, which is, great. But in the grand scheme of things, you're not really doing anything that's going to grow the blockchain industry or the cryptocurrency industry as a whole. So really, I don't see it. I see ICOs as a great funding mechanism, but other than in terms of having to then sell yourself and say, oh, I'm another Vitalik Buterin who invented a badass coin. This is going to become the top 5 cryptocurrency within the next couple months. I mean, if you're that smart, then maybe it works. But if you're not, which I'm assuming most people aren't, it's kind of a waste of time. And the other reason why is it requires a lot of regulations. It requires a lot of licenses. It requires, you really put a target on your back. Which is not what I've wanted to do. I mean, there's a reason why this whole entire platform was designed very stealthily, and that's just because there's no reason to, kind of sit on top of the mountain and tell the world what you're doing, and have your legs chopped out from under you until you're ready to do that. So that's just my personal belief. I think ICOs are valuable for certain things, but otherwise, I think they're a waste of time and resources.
Yeah, I mean, just the whole raising money aspect of it was the whole main premise behind it, really. And you could do that with just a regular Reg D. It was just kind of like, it was like a way around it, doing the crowds. It's like crowdsourcing, which is really big now, crowdfunding equity.
Right. The biggest issue is when everyone tries to go out for the gold rush, people abuse the system.
Yeah.
And they kind of ruin it for everybody.
Definitely. So, okay, in a nutshell, like for everybody that's watching or kind of like, we talked about the real estate transaction. I guess explain it in like layman's terms, what this is going to do for business.
So in layman's terms, what it really allows someone to do is it allows 2 known entities to make a blockchain and cryptocurrency transaction, which the reason why that's important is because you're going to bypass, for example, in a real estate transaction, you're going to bypass brokers. If you're doing an international transaction, you're going to bypass a form of escrow, and you're going to bypass a form of intermediary custodial bank. Because sometimes
basically is bypassing the middleman, and that is what the basis of cryptocurrency is. We're just bypassing the middleman in every form, no matter what industry we're in, and that's what's really great about the crypto world.
Correct. And the biggest issue is now is there aren't enough decentralized applications doing this to fuel blockchain and cryptocurrency growth, which is why you read all the time these articles that scare people and say, oh, look, here's the end of the crypto world because the market just shaved off another $40 million or whatever it might be. But in the grand scheme of things, what people don't understand is that the cyclical rate at which cryptocurrencies enter and exit the market happens so fast that as long as the market cap is within the tens of billions of dollars, you have plenty of runway to be able to do these large transactions. Which is why the exchanges and mines are very important to the Cybrswype network, in the same way that the banks were important to Swift's network, which is the standard communications platform for banks. So in the same way that Swift in the 70s pretty much roped together a bunch of banking institutions to make a standard way to communicate and send wires, this is exactly kind of what Cybrswype is trying to achieve.
So at the end of the day, like, people have trouble with that trust factor now. Now that there's no escrow, there's no intermediaries, there's no people to watch over the transaction. It's like, which party's going to trust each other now?
Which that comes down to education, because everything, like I said, with Cybrswype being the actual point of exchange, it's a peer-to-peer transaction. It's someone sending money to somebody else, and they're putting their trust not in Cybrswype or the network itself of exchanges, but they're putting the trust in the Ethereum blockchain. They're putting their trust in a decentralized network that as long as there are miners, as long as there are coins being bought and sold, it's going to exist. It will never go offline, and nobody owns the ownership to it. That is very important, but a lot of people don't understand that. And so a lot of what Cybrswype's been doing, and if you did get a chance to look at kind of the Excel sheets, more than 90% or 85% of what we're asking for is going back into marketing, which includes this educational aspect. Because a lot of these people, they say, this is great, but I don't understand it. I need to learn that I'm putting my trust in, if I own the means to production, whether it's being a real estate owner or whether it's being a producer of something, as long as I own my means to production, I don't have to rely on anybody anymore, because now I can use a standard system, the standard network to procure the cryptocurrency, use it in the form of a transaction to buy a tangible asset, and then liquidate it into cash, or use, a couple of our mining institutions that are proof of stake, and have your coins grow over time. So I mean, it's very interesting to kind of be a part of this, because that's kind of the reason why I like the project and why I'm putting a lot of my time and energy and money into it, is because it's really a feasible way to integrate blockchain and crypto practically. But a lot of it stems on education.
Yeah. What do you need the money for again?
So we're looking to raise $3 million primarily for this marketing campaign. So not only to market, but to educate, to work with some of the representatives that we've made at the World Bank, as well as all over the world. I mean, there's a lot out of London that we've been working with. South America, Brazil, Argentina, and they understand it, but it's one thing to say it over the phone or via email, and then another thing to actually fly down there and to, have them work on it, look on it, touch and feel it. So really the bulk of the money is going solely into marketing. The other bits of the capital raise are going into things like legal and other kind of back end office expenses. Nothing is really going into paying for salaries or anything.
What kind of marketing would you start with? Where would you spend the money exactly?
That's a really good question. So right now, what I've learned especially is the kind of, the transfer of information. And I've learned a great deal about this from Jonathan, who's actually one of the creators of Pitch. What I kind of saw through what he did is he's very good at, taking something that's very complex and putting it in, let's say, like a 60 or 90-second video and blowing people's minds. And I think that's something that we really want to focus on this kind of short form, but very educational, very intuitive and precise messages that we can send all over the world. Because the issue is, a lot of these different institutions and individuals, they speak English, but they don't speak our English. They don't really, there is a language barrier. So it's getting past that. So a lot of the money that would go into marketing would obviously go towards, a travel budget for one. And then for two, it's going to be used for the production and the creation of these educational materials. In terms of the demos and everything, that explains itself, which we already have. But the biggest thing is educating and then explaining ourselves, how we work and why you're going to put trust in not us, but the blockchain, Ethereum's blockchain, to make these transactions happen.
What is your ideal client to go after right now?
It's a very good question, actually. To answer kind of just very basically, and I'll give you an explanation. It's a already accredited, validated buyer or seller, but who happens to be in kind of a developing economy, or someone who does a lot of business in a developing economy. So to just break that down briefly, a lot of these bigger companies, like for example, we were speaking with AOT Energy, which is a very large energy company, billions of dollars in revenues a year. And the problem was for them was they saw the value in kind of changing, but just not yet. They're someone who would be a very later adopter. So institutions that are already in developed economies that stay within developed economies, so that's like, the UK buying, oil from the United States or something, or, even Saudi Arabia, another relatively developed economy. So for them, they don't see the value in this yet. But for, a company, or sorry, excuse me, a country such as like Senegal or Nigeria or Kenya, Ghana, these are countries that have very reputable companies that do very reputable business with reputable buyers over, in westernized westernized economies, excuse me. And they're the reason why they are the very kind of favorable user is because they don't like to deal with their banks. They already don't. They actually bank most of the time in Liechtenstein, Belgium, or Switzerland. So that's very expensive because for every dollar that they'd make, they're going to spend 20 cents just on banking, because they have all their banking is not in-house. It's not done domestically. So they're already at a disadvantage for one. and then they're going to lose about another 15 cents due to currency conversion rates. So realistically, they have a lot to gain from this, because as long as, like I said, they can hold the means to their own production, they essentially are they themselves are their own banks.
So underdeveloped countries that don't have their own banking system they can use for big transactions.
Yeah, so it's really for underdeveloped countries, but with repeatable buyers and sellers, because Cybrswype takes KYC very seriously, and we also kind of use a lot of our KYC also comes from the partners that we have, as well as telecom subsidiaries. So like all the major U.S. telecom and their subsidiaries, you have to be compatible with them in order to onboard to Cybrswype, for one. And the second thing is our partnerships with the exchanges and mines require KYC in order to be able to send money to them in order to get the cryptocurrency. So we take KYC very seriously. So the biggest thing that we are avoiding, and we're doing a very good job at avoiding it so far, is in these underdeveloped economies, there's obviously a lot of very shady kind of business entities, and we stay very far away from them.
Gotcha.
So.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely going to take some travel expenses for sure.
Right.
What is your, okay, so you mentioned, kind of those undeveloped countries. What is the next client, I guess?
That's another very good question. We've actually, so right now or I guess I would say that kind of the people that we've been working with closely are, we have a couple companies that are in a variety of different industries out of Ghana, Nigeria, and Kenya. And then we have some from Belarus, and then some from London, or from the UK. The next, and also they're ranging from a wide variety of industries, like I said. One of them primarily does a lot of gold transactions. One of them primarily does a lot of agricultural goods. The one in Ghana does, if I remember correctly, they're doing coffee and another agricultural product. And the other ones do petroleum. And then one of the ones out of the UK is doing a mineral. I forget what the mineral was. But anyway, the next kind of step to this is really furthering the connections within Zimbabwe. One of our representatives that has been very, very interested with this project, they work very closely with dignitaries from the World Bank from Zimbabwe, and they're very interested in doing this and using this for regional trade, so being able to buy and sell regionally within the continent. So that's the next kind of big target for us.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay, really cool. Let's see if I have any more questions. As far as your investors go, do you give them a kind of like an estimated time of kind of like a return on their investment?
Yeah, so the estimated time that we have is by the end of the year, we're aiming to be cash flow positive. Because if you look at the Excel sheets again, if you get the chance to, there's a page about potential transactions, and these are transactions that are coming from the entities that I just kind of briefly
I did see that.
Glassed over, and they're all doing annualized amounts of volume, but after one transaction, the company will be cash flow positive in terms of what expenses are coming out versus revenues coming in. In terms of being able to pay back investors, we're really looking to do that within the first 18 months after being cash flow positive. So, and any time in between that period.
Gotcha. I see an example transaction here, taking quite a bit of fees. Like you said before, they're already incurring 20-30% fees because they can't use their own bank.
Well, actually, the fees on that represent the fees or the commissions that are going out to the representatives involved in bringing those transactions. Because the issue is short term, the only way that we were actually able to get to these inner circles all over the world was to provide very, very reasonable amounts of commission rates for these different independent representatives, contractors. That's the only way to get them to actually work very, very diligently, was to give them something very, very nice. But in terms of long term, we're looking, and they know this as well, it's in their contract, is that there's a short term contract, and that Cybrswype retains the right to terminate the contract at any time. Because eventually we do want to switch over to a in-house representation program or in-house, liaison program, in which we won't have to pay those large commission rates.
Yeah. I just for the transactions that the African light crude to Asia. So you mean to tell me that just to transfer and buy from Africa to Asia,
it's a yearly contract.
They have to they incur fees on their currency of like 30-40%.
The fees actually aren't in there, the ones that you're talking about.
Okay,
In turn, yeah, getting away from that, yes, yeah. Fees not necessarily that large, but fees that they're incurring are they're really, so the 30% figure that I was giving earlier, what they're gonna end up paying in terms of the cost it's going to take to maintain bank accounts in other countries, more stabilized countries, and then actually to have the capital expenditures for all the personnel required, not just the personnel to actually fly to those banks, but to work with those banks, as well as to do all the legal requirements and compliance requirements for those banks. So that figure was everything that would cost in a year to pay all the personnel to make that happen. In terms of the fees that they're going to pay on the transaction side alone, just the transaction side, it's very dependent on the situation, but it can be anywhere to 7 to 20%, depending on where they are in the world. And that 20% seems like a very high figure, but we were speaking to a lot of representatives from Uganda that say that just alone to get money through like a Western Union route, if they're going to get paid through kind of a Western Union wire transfer, they take
a lot. I know.
Yeah, they take a lot. So that's the issue. And the biggest problem is that's some of the only channels that they have, because Uganda is not a westernized industrial economy or information age economy. So they're looking at, because they control the means to their production. They control their farms, they control their mines. The problem is getting money in and out of the country. And the other thing is, going back to kind of taking another step back, when I said public eye governments and entities, national entities, they're really interested to actually do a lot of PR and give a lot of awareness to their enterprises, to their businesses, because their countries are cash strapped. Because they take their money out and put them in Belgium or Liechtenstein or Switzerland. No one's investing into their economies. So that is a problem, because you have other countries like China, or they come in and they say, oh, we'll build you your dam and give you infrastructure projects with these crazy loans, and they're essentially subject to other countries, essentially like their aid packages, because there are no domestic businesses paying the government, which gives them the ability to pay back these foreign loans. So it's really a sticky situation, and I don't really want to say this poorly, but because of their vulnerability, there's a large potentiality for success in these areas of the world.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, I'm not sure if I could be any help to you as far as even the marketing side. Like this, I believe this is going to require a totally different style of marketing and what I'm kind of used to. But I definitely enjoyed the conversation and kind of learned something new on this pitch as well. But I'll definitely, I don't know if you have any questions for me.
I do have a question. If I may ask, what's the different style, or what style do you think that we need, in your opinion?
I mean, you need like people on foot, clients ground to ground, face to face, traveling, like you said, to actually close deals. These kind of deals don't get closed. Oh, you're not looking for social media conversions. Right. On a landing page or anything like that. You need people on foot, independent contractors, like you said, and going out and facilitating these B2B transactions.
Right. No, exactly. I was just curious as to what your thoughts were. And then I actually have one more other question. I mean, from your opinion, I know that you had a lot of success and expertise in this kind of area, blockchain and cryptocurrency. I mean, what are your overall thoughts of the project?
I believe it's feasible. It's one of those long-term growth, steady growth type of things. Once you land one client, you go on to the next one. Once it's that client acquisition. So you land one of these clients down here, and they believe in the system, they trust the system. Word of mouth is probably the best way you're going to be able to market this business. Is that the guy these companies talk to each other. So then they'll be like, oh, you did this transaction over the blockchain, you saved this much money. Boom, tell your partner. That's kind of how you're going to expand mostly.
Right. No, that's exactly right. I just wanted to get your thoughts on it. So, well, I really appreciate the time.
Yeah, enjoyed the conversation for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Pitch Investors Live, for making this happen. And good luck and everything. If you got any questions, feel free to reach out at any time.
Cool. I really appreciate it. I probably will. So,
All right, man.
all right. You too. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.